We're going to get started here with the Carson City Audit Committee. If we'd start with roll, please.
Chairperson Bertrand.
Here.
Vice Chair Prowse. Member Bagwell.
Present.
Member Sonata.
Present.
A quorum's present.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to first of all open this up for public comments and discussion. Just explain that the public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Audit Committee. In order for members of the public to participate in the committee's consideration of an agenda item, the committee strongly encourages members of the public to comment on an agenda item during the item itself. No action may be taken on a matter raised under public comment unless the item has been specifically included on the agenda as an item upon which action may be taken. At this time, is there any public comment? Okay.
For the record, Jim Shirk. I'm here as a citizen and as a Board of Supervisor for Ward 4. I am not speaking for the board as a whole, only as an individual board member. I've talked to the city manager about meetings such as this taking place in the afternoon as 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock. I've encouraged him and all boards such as yourself to meet and start time at 5:30. And if we consider that for future agendas, it allows the public, even though they may not be able to be here today, I think it is the better protocol to have these meetings in the evening where the citizens can attend. Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you, Supervisor and Citizen Shirk. Is there any other comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes for August 12, 2014 and November 19, 2014. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the minutes for August 12th and November 19th.
You second.
That's right, I'll have to second it. Yeah, that's kind of odd. Yeah, I guess there's nobody left. I'll go ahead and second that. Any discussion, Mary?
No.
All right, then we'll go ahead when the minutes of August the 12th, 2014, November 19th are accepted.
Please show me as an abstain because I was not present during those times. Thank you.
Okay, over on to item number 5, the adoption of our agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll accept it's approved and accepted. Item number 6. At this time, we're going to be discussing the audit findings for the June 30th, 2014 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I believe that my understanding is the city staff is going to be discussing the findings, and I'm assuming there's somebody as well as from ID Bailey as well to discuss it. So if you can go. There's nobody?
There's nobody from Ide Bailey, Mr. Chair.
Nobody from Ide, okay.
Just
then,
city staff.
Okay. All right, so if you can go ahead and like to discuss the findings.
Sure. For the record, Nick Providenti, Finance Director. So the Audit Committee had asked that we provide periodic updates throughout the year of any of the audit findings from the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So what I've included in the packet is the schedule of the findings and question costs that were in the June 30th, 2014 CAFR. So you can basically read those, and we've gotten some. I guess we could start with the U.S. Department of Transportation finding its 2014-1. That's on page. It says 175. That 175 is referenced as the CAFR reference. But what we're talking about is possible unallowable costs that could be charged to federal programs and procedures that were not in place at the Carson City Public Works Department to ensure that the documentation of time and effort by all employees was adequate to support salary and benefit charges to the Federal Transit Cluster Grant. And that's CFDA 20.207. So they made some recommendations, and then we basically have our response on page 178. The second finding was a very similar finding for it was finding 2 incomplete information was reported to the federal awarding agency. The personnel did not have adequate procedures in place that the SF 425 federal financial reports for the Federal Transit Cluster submitted to the federal awarding agency included all the required information. So they've made some recommendations, and we included in the audit at that time the actual management's response, which is on page 178 and 179. And, we do have representatives from the Public Works folks here, and they can go ahead and kind of give you an update on what they've actually been doing throughout the year.
Hello, Patrick Pittenger, Transportation Manager from the Public Works Department, and I have with me Graham Dollarhide, the Transit Coordinator. The two of us are responsible for the administration of the JAC system, which, as we hire a contractor to do most of the operating, most of our duties are administrative, including this reporting. So the first finding, 2014-001, most of the hours and most of the money that is charged to the transit grant is actually for staff like myself and Graham. And those timesheets, we all have very detailed signed timesheets. Those were not of an issue. A small minority of the time that is charged to this grant is actually people that work in the streets department, streets division of the Public Works Department, doing things like emptying garbage cans or cleaning a bus stop. It's worth a lot less money, but it's an important task that they carry out. Because they don't do that in their, as a full-time job like Graham and I do, they did not have the detailed timesheets that we have. So that was what the finding was related to, that they didn't have the detailed signed timesheets. Graham did work with the auditor to make sure that what we developed as a response to this, for a new version of timesheet to be filled out and signed, did meet the requirements. So we won't have this issue in the future. So I believe the matter is closed because we've had the issue identified and we've addressed it. Any questions before I do the second one?
So Patrick, you're saying now that the system to charge against the grant matches the new timesheets that you have for those staff? You're able to allocate
The system didn't, the only thing that changed was just the timesheet that we keep for a specific amount of time that is specifically signed by the employee. That's the only thing that we really had to change, was to have a new timesheet that they signed for our records to prove this person did this work on a federal reimbursable activity. Other than that, nothing else needed to change.
But my question comes to, is there someone that's tying that out to ensure the amount charged to the grant matches the time?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
On the
That was already occurring.
Okay.
Yes, that was already
just not a signature in a proper formatting.
It wasn't signed on the bottom on the correct form.
Okay, so you do have an allocation
yes.
methodology from the timesheets to tie those out?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That was already in
Okay.
place. That didn't need to change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. And the second finding, 2014-002, basically, it was a reporting error. Graham primarily, but also with myself, we have to do substantial reporting for these federal grants, and that includes multiple quarterly and additional annual reports. In this specific case, there was actually a report that had, we call it something else, but it serves, I believe, as a 425 under the federal requirements. We actually go into a federal system. We provide data. It's like lines A through Q or something. And frankly, our staff inadvertently left a line blank. And upon submission to the Federal Transit Administration, the Federal Transit Administration didn't even catch it in their review. So our auditors are definitely doing their jobs. It was a simple reporting error, and what was not, what was inadvertently left out was the quarterly revenue, which would be like fare box revenues. Certainly no motivation to leave it off. It was human error. Can't say it'll never happen again, but we are just instilling in ourselves the necessity to check and double check as we enter in these numerous numbers. As funny as that sounds.
I just have one question. As far as the severity of the exception, there's not, the federal government, there hasn't been any request from the federal government for any reimbursement, so there's nothing else you really need. It's just more of our internal controls and reporting.
Indeed.
And the chances are that something would come back is very low.
Right.
Is that correct?
As far as we're concerned, it's case closed. We're not aware of any ramifications, and we're appreciative that the auditors point out our error and set us on the right path.
Great. Are there any other comments or questions from Audit Committee members? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Nick Providenti, Finance Director. So the next three findings were basically findings from the Health and Human Services Department, and Nikki Aker, the Director, is here. And do you want to just go ahead and start and discuss, and if we have any questions?
For the record, Nikki Aker, Director, Carson City Health and Human Services. So for our department, finding 2014-003, this was about the same type of thing that Patrick was talking about, that we didn't have on the timesheet what percentage went to specific grants for an individual. And we've got people that work primarily, they'll work 100% on one grant, and then we've got individuals that can work on many different grants, so it's all put into a percentage. And so what we did is we put a policy in place, and we'll have a checks and balance that the employee has on their timesheet what percentage they're working to which grant, and then the checks and balance that we put into place are that the manager signing off on that timesheet will review it to double check that percentage is on the timesheets. And I think you have a copy of that.
Okay, are there any comments or questions on that finding? Okay. And is there anything else you needed to add to that, Nikki?
Not to that one.
Okay.
Okay, and the next one is finding 2014-004, and this is about a report submitted to our the federal. It's a federal financial reporting report that's submitted to our grantor, and what had happened was when the grant or the report was submitted, there was some questions about what information was on that report, and the person that had made the initial report couldn't match things up with what was submitted. So we put a policy and procedure in place that any supporting documentation like a spreadsheet or information that we get out of our accounting system will be included with that report as supporting material on our end, so that when questions come further on down the road, we've got that supporting document, and the figures, we'll know what figures were exactly reported.
So Nikki, have you already tested a quarterly report with your new procedure?
I
And
don't
it's working?
think.
Yes, the first quarter report.
This is Ana Jimenez. She is our business manager, and she's the one that does these reports for us.
Right, so I submitted the first quarter report for the first quarter of the fiscal year 15, and I did test the backup reporting, and it's in our files, so now, a year from now, 2 years from now, anybody can go back and know what we used as backup for the reporting.
Okay, so you're going to consider that this matter's closed because you've tested the actual procedure?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
And for our final finding, the 2014-005, this was our matching contributions, and we had, our grantor on this particular grant is It's a PHP grant, a Public Health Preparedness Grant, and our grantor is the state, or sub-grantee for the state. And we had information from them that we could use specific things for matches, and when we were audited, they said that those were not allowable. So we have gotten further clarification exactly what is allowable, put a policy and procedure in place, and within the policy and procedure, it indicates specifically what is allowable. And so we're hoping, that this will, it's lined out specifically so it will define what is allowable.
So because we had question match on this one, is the state asking for us to return any dollars, or were we able to find other match to meet the requirements?
We were able to find other match, and no, they're not asking us to return any.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So does that complete all the audit findings that were addressed in the audit?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, going on to the next audit item, agenda item. I'm thinking like an auditor. Regarding the Audit Committee's role to review the city's comprehensive annual financial report, the CAFR, and to make possible recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. This is really, let's say, the Vice Chairman, Bill Prowse, he's out today on a family emergency, and I know this has kind of been his baby and his real focus, so I'm kind of coming here not totally prepared. However, he did give me a few questions he would like me to ask of staff. And before I get started, though, is there anything that that you would like to discuss regarding the Audit Committee's role?
Well, I had talked a little with Bill, and I don't know if he had spoken with you, Mark, about this, because my understanding was that he wanted to actually take the CAFR and do some actual analysis, or have Moss Adams do some racial analysis and those types of things with the CAFR. And I don't know if he had talked to Mark, or if he talked to Nancy Young, or a combination of the two, and whether or not you guys had come to some sort of agreement on what you thought should be done. That was my understanding.
So yes, Bill and I had spoken, Mark Sturenka for the record from Moss Adams. So I guess two things. One was a discussion just about what the Audit Committee's role was. Not that that's up to us, but just, discussing it. And I believe the Audit Committee's desire, Bill's desire, was to be able to have a chance to ask questions before the CAFR was finalized. And so this was kind of just a quote-unquote trial run of that process. And so he did ask us to take a look at the CAFR. We did. We gave him some questions. I know he's got some of his own, and some questions that, here are things that, as an Audit Committee member, you might ask. And so we did provide those. As the chair indicated, it's unfortunate Bill couldn't make it to this meeting. So, but yes, to respond to your questions.
So I guess we're probably not going to take any action on this. I mean, I think, like I said, the Vice Chairman was one that was really focusing on this and had a lot of input. But there were some questions that came up, and there's a couple of them that I'm just kind of curious about, if you can provide any information on it. And one of them was regarding the deferred loss and the refunding of the $3.4 million. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I have no knowledge of any of these questions, so I'm not really prepared to really answer anything. If you had given me some notice, I probably could have done a little bit of research.
Okay.
But I mean, off the top of my head, it would require a little bit of research probably to answer all those questions.
So,
and I wasn't sure that's where we were going with this. So yeah, I mean, nobody told me anything about any questions about issues with the audit.
Yeah,
So.
I think. Michael, you had asked, I think Bill had assumed Kafori was going to be here, and I'm assuming he assumed that, and so that they would be available for questions. I didn't know, though, either.
Right.
It is a little difficult because this is really kind of, Bill's been really looking at this so far, so, we can only go so far in it, but there are some questions, and there's things that, and like I said, unfortunately, Bill's not here today, but probably in the future, if there are some specific questions on the CAFR, that possibly get those to you in advance so they can be addressed.
So maybe what we should do on this is agendize this for our June meeting and actually have any members, any of us, including Bill, that's not here, but to submit the questions in advance so they can be researched by staff and then also publicly posted with the agenda so the public has an opportunity to see what questions are going to be asked in advance in case they want to attend and weigh in on that.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
That would be fine.
Good. Okay, then with that, with no other comments, then we'll just get this on a future agenda. Okay, agenda item number 8, for possible,
I'll make a public disclosure on that.
okay, go ahead.
So on item number 8, I'm actually going to be abstaining from voting on this item because my son works for the audit firm. He does not do Carson City's audit, but since he works for Eide Bailey, I will be abstaining from this item.
Okay, thank you for that disclosure. Okay, so again, this is to approve the Finance Review and Selection Committee, the recommendation for the contract to Eide Bailey for the Carson City external audit function, and authorize staff to prepare a contract and board action form for Board of Supervisors approval. So I guess the discussion is just amongst you and me, Mary, at this point. So do you have any comments, questions?
Yeah, were there any other bidders on the contract?
Sure. For the record, Nick Providenti, Finance Director. We got 2 bids, one from Keddington and Christensen LLC, which is from what we can understand, it's a smaller firm. I think they're based in Utah. And, again, we had gone through the committee, myself, a couple of members of my staff, the city manager, and then Bill Prowse, the vice chairman, had gone through and kind of rated their proposals. We kind of looked at, basically the qualifications, the approach, the certifications, the expense matrix, and, the types of experience that the 2 firms had. And we had pretty much overwhelmingly selected the Eide Bailey just based on their knowledge and experience with Nevada. The other firm, it looked like, was interested in moving to Northern Nevada or trying to get Northern Nevada business, but based on their proposal, we couldn't really see that they had much Northern Nevada experience, especially county experience. They had audited some smaller cities and some smaller GIDs, but Carson City, as you know, is a consolidated municipality, and mainly on these financial statement sides, it's more of a county, which deals with certain issues, and we felt overwhelmingly that Eide Bailey would be the better choice to award that. So.
Well, then with that, is there a motion to make a recommendation for the audit firm to the board?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we recommend Eide Bailey be engaged as the auditors for the next external audit.
I second that. Any further discussion? I don't think so. Okay. With that, then, our recommendation is that Eide Bailey be the ones recommended to the board to do the financial audit.
Yeah, actually, if I may, Mr. Chair, I believe we're planning on awarding a 3-year contract. Okay. So I don't know if you just want to make a motion to approve the contract or the recommendation to contract, because what we'll be doing is we'll be doing a 3-year contract with them, and it'll be a task-based contract, and we'll bring this back again, I guess, next year, just to make the recommendation. Just
okay. Do we need to adjust the motion and the final?
I'll amend my motion to include a 3-year contract with Eide Bailey.
Okay. All right. Okay. I guess that we don't need to say, yeah. Done. Yeah. Is there anything else before we move to the next agenda item? Okay. Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action to discuss the audit work program. This is, Moss Adams is here today, Mark Stranka, to discuss what the status is of the different projects. Would you go ahead, Mark?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You should have in your packet a 2-page status report. We had initially planned to present the internal controls report this meeting. We'll be targeting that for the next meeting. We want to provide a little bit more time for management to review the draft report. So we thought it would just take the opportunity to give you an overall status report of the different activities we've been working on in this fiscal year's program. I won't for sure ask me any questions that you have, but I'll just sort of summarize each project versus going through sort of item by item to make it a little bit more cohesive. The basic internal auditor services covers our attendance of audit committee meetings, board meetings, kind of general meetings associated with our program, and the audit findings tracking, and we'll cover that particular topic in the next agenda item. The internal controls review, so a status there. So we've prepared our draft report. It's with management now. They're reviewing it, although this, as part of the process, you're validating facts as you're going along, but still at the end, we still do another facts validation, sort of test the practicality of our recommendations, and have certainly some discussion of our findings, or what we call issues and recommendations. And so the plan would be for that to come back to you as a final report at your next meeting, whatever date we come up with. Probably was our last agenda item. Went very smoothly, and we'll certainly give you a full report of that in the next meeting. The strategic planning, so that sort of fell under our last fiscal year audit program had, and one of the projects was developing performance metrics, really on behalf of the board and the audit committee, sort of high-level metrics across the city for each department. The discussion there was, the ideal sequencing of work such as that is you have a strategic plan first, you develop performance metrics that are aligned with the goals, the objectives, the strategies that are in the strategic plan. When the desire to do some work on the performance metrics last year, we did that, but that was with the sort of the knowledge that the current plan, the current strategic plan was sort of at its sunset. The city was going to be working on a next strategic plan, which has been happening now. And so that when that strategic plan was put in place, we would revisit the performance metrics and make sure that we identify those that we identified initially, or potentially new ones that would have metrics that were aligned with the goals, objectives, and strategies in the plan. And so that's what we're doing now, but we've also been helping the city with their overall strategic planning process. So we've had, I don't know, Nick, I think for at least 2 work sessions with the management team. This is dating back to October or beforehand. And if Marina was here, she would keep us aligned on the right dates. 2 meetings with the full management team to revisit the goals, work on objectives, and an initial set of strategies. And then Lori, when did we meet with the board? Was that February? Yeah, February.
First meeting in February, I believe.
We had a work session with the board plus the department managers where we revisited all of that material, made some adjustments. Certainly, that information was presented to the board in February, right? Also, as you can tell, my sense of timing is terrible. And that information, although still preliminary, was approved to be shared with the public. And so there'll be a series of open houses, some key stakeholder outreach, Chamber of Commerce, some of the larger businesses, and a survey instrument online to be able to elicit feedback from the public on the contents of what I'd call the draft plan or the plan components, which right now are mission, vision, goals, objectives, and strategies. So we'll collect that feedback from the public. In parallel, we're working on the performance metrics, and then that is targeted to come back to the board probably towards the end of April, and that would be for the board to be able to review and adopt the final strategic plan. And so again, but the reason I sort of started with the performance metric is that was kind of the nexus between what the audit program was last year and the strategic plan, to be able to tie those two together.
So, Mark, is the purpose then, do you see it carrying forward from the strategic plan to performance-based measures, then tying those into the actual budget process? Is that the overreaching goal?
There has been interest expressed by the city regarding performance-based budgeting, and I'll turn it over to Nick in a second so he can comment on it. The work on the performance metrics isn't being done exclusively for that reason. There was interest on the part of the board and the audit committee to go sort of towards, I'll call performance-based management. It doesn't necessarily have to be budgeting, but if the city wants to make that next step, they certainly could. But it's not dependent on the city going to performance-based budgeting to be able to use the metrics.
Yeah, and I believe, for the record, Nick Providenti, it's still kind of a work in progress. I think discussions still need to be made, at the board level on what exactly they want and expect from that process. So that's my understanding. Nothing has really been set in stone as of this point. It's still up for
Right,
discussion.
and I would add the other cities that we do this type of work with, none of those in particular have gone to the point of performance-based budgeting, specifically or explicitly, but what they do is sort of what we developed in the initial set of performance metrics is they use it as kind of an executive dashboard that can give the decision makers sort of what I call a finger on the pulse of the operations of the city. And some of it is, outcome-based, some of it is cost-based, some of it is efficiency-focused, but so you get a sense of the things we're doing having the impact that we want them to have, and are we doing it in a seemingly cost-effective way, and kind of what those trends look like. And the city had already worked towards that with the performance metrics and the name of the system I always forget, sorry.
One that had stop signs or green lights?
Yeah, anyway, but the city had taken really a bottom-up approach on developing performance metrics where there were hundreds, if not thousands, down at the detailed level. And so this was just sort of surrounding that with taking a top-down approach of saying, okay, what would a board member, what would an audit committee member, what would a director of the city want to look at, at a citywide or enterprise level. And so that's sort of where the audit committees, the work that we've done under the direction of the audit committee has come in. And so certainly, again, could be used for performance-based budgeting, but doesn't have to be.
So at what point will it be ready where we'll, in a sense, have this dashboard where we'll be able to have that information where we as an audit committee can look at it and possibly give us some information as to what departments probably need to be looked at, and also where you're working with, I guess, with the manager, that they have this information so that they're able to start to use it for themselves in their operations?
Well, good questions. Certainly at some point in time, after the strategic plan has been adopted by the board, in terms of a formal process, the metrics that we developed, in the last fiscal year, we did do some trend. We gathered data to provide a 3-year trend. So that information exists, but I would think in terms of a sort of a formal decision-making tool at some point after the strategic plan's been adopted, and the city sort of puts that process in place to be able to report on whatever those metrics end up being. So, and I don't really want to speak for Nick because that's more
Again, I think it all depends on when the actual performance, the plan gets adopted. So I suspect it'll be probably after sometime in the summer, right? Isn't that kind of I think that's the goal, because we still need to kind of do all the public outreach, and then the board still has to adopt the actual plan. So, I'm thinking of, probably in the summer sometime, I would think.
So what I'm trying to gather here then is, I'm looking for the efficiency of the product that we're actually doing here. So we're doing a strategic plan. It's going to then work into performance metrics, and then possibly not this budget season, but the next budget season, it would provide opportunities for the department heads to have reviewed what's happening and look at organizational structures, efficiencies, look at ways that they might reorganize, they might bring in a different budget request. What I'm trying to see is what the purpose and the overall goal and implementation is, so the public can say, okay, we spent, I don't know, $50,000 doing strategic planning, performance metrics, and what does that buy us? What did that provide to the public? And so are we about a year out then to be able to provide good details to the department heads, the city manager,
Yeah,
and the board?
I think that's fair. I think when we actually met with the board, Mark, you had indicated that, we're going to be going through this process and that it'll probably be for the fiscal 17 budget when most of these things will take place. Because we're actually going to be finishing up the fiscal 16 budget probably in the next couple weeks. So there really isn't going to be time, and we have to file that budget with the tentative budget by April 15th, and then the board has to, adopt the actual budget by May. So there's this process, this performance measure process and the strategic plan process won't be done by then. But I think we can actually look towards the fiscal 17 budget to do those types of things that you had suggested.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I guess I'm curious, are we as an audit committee going to get anything more than an overview saying you're doing this before we adopt it? I mean, I personally, I'd kind of like to see what these measures are and...
Actually, good question, and my apologies, I sort of failed to address that. So here's what I envision. So the strategic plan is really the board's document, and we probably, I was thinking about this beforehand. The strategic plan, I would think, should go to the board first before it comes to the audit committee, because in terms of sharing it with the public, I think since it's a board activity, that's sort of the sequence. But I think that the performance metrics, that sequence may end up being the case anyway, because if we meet with the board on the strategic plan before the next audit committee meeting, the same would be the case for the performance metrics. But we certainly could bring those back to the audit committee for you to be able to review, be able to comment on. And that would just depend on the timing of when we as an audit committee meet next. But I would want to do the plan itself sort of to the board first, because I think that would be the proper protocol. And just so you know, and we haven't really solidified any of the metrics yet. I wouldn't even say we have a draft set, because we're waiting for the strategic plan process to play out and provide the basis. Now, do I expect a lot of changes to the strategic plan based on the public input process? No, but there could be tweaks, and we want to do the metrics based on the final plan in terms of what the board's direction is in terms of the contents of that plan. But certainly Mary, the metrics will come back to the audit committee at some point.
Yeah, so I think what we're looking for then is, we had kind of like a preliminary, a few months that you made a presentation, it was like that preliminary dashboard, what the metrics were, and kind of highlighted something. So really what's happened is everything is in place. It's just a matter of waiting till the strategic plan is set up to really fine tune it. So really, once the strategic plan is done, the city has that, it won't take Moss Adams very long to then, boom, be able to roll out. So I guess the big defining thing is, the deciding factor is the timing of when you get the strategic plan. Soon after that, we should be able to get those metrics. And then at that point, it'll be something that we can then take a look at. I guess as an audit committee, it'll help possibly in future audits, or looking at things for performance, look at the ones that probably look like they're more susceptible to having some particular issues.
Correct. And the other thing would be, not all of the metrics that we came up with in the first go-around, I'm sure not all of those will be metrics that are necessarily tied to the plan. Those still could be metrics that the audit committee is interested in, because we sort of took great care to have a certain type of metrics for each one, where we're looking at cost per capita, for example, or cost per employee, and things like that. So, because that's what the audit committee's interest was in. So there in essence could end up being two sets one's a broader set than what's in the strategic plan, and that's fine too. I mean, there are different layers of leadership and decision-making.
And I think there also might be more specific, metrics that the department heads will have to come up with as well, that we could, bring forth. Because I know in talking to the city manager, I mean, basically, once we get that strategic plan, I mean, he's gonna grade the department head's performance on metrics that they come up with that align with that strategic plan. So we're gonna have to come up with specific metrics based on, how we fit into the plan as department directors. So, I mean, it's still gonna be a work in progress, and it's probably gonna be, like you said, it's probably gonna take, the rest of this calendar year, to figure everything out. And, I suspect we'll have you guys involved, every step of the way. But it's just kind of a work in progress right now. And it's active strategies. That's the name of that.
Thank you.
Okay,
One of these days I'll remember it.
Yeah, so I remember then, really, we're going to have kind of, as I remember too, we were looking at just having 3-4 key performance indicators for each of the departments, and then under that, in a sense, the department heads are going to then, to get to those 3 or 4, they might have their own set underneath that, so that we're kind of like looking at it as more of a broader. So basically, when you came out with the last report, we were looking at the overall performance of everything, and then they're going to be, when it comes back to us, it's going to be more of the detail, what the department heads have agreed to and recognize that they can do to get to be able to provide the information on it. I guess my other question is, after we have this set up, then is there going to be any kind of monitoring process implemented? Like or is it basically every department manager is on their own and we have to come by and take a look at it later?
No, I suspect there will be. Again, I'm not sure that we've decided how we're going to do that, but I suspect there should be some sort of monitoring process, some sort of, even, report to the audit committee and to the board, quarterly or, every other quarter, biannually or whatever. But there should be some sort of monitoring, I suspect.
Then maybe that might be part of the report as far as a recommendation, after you've taken a look at that, a recommendation to the audit committee as far as how that should be monitored, so that they know that we're going to be coming back, taking a look at that, and making sure too that the data and the numbers are verifiable.
Well, and then, again, I recognize not this budget go-around, but certainly for the next one, I would like that when budgets are being presented, that we're able to give the public the story of each department. So it would be, I think it's an opportunity to say, these are the successes and this is what we achieved and this is what our goals are for the next year, because I think that's something that often is overlooked for a budget process. And even though I'll admit I'm a numbers kind of person, I think the narrative is missing from the budget process. And so I'd like to see us actually link this in reports in the future that, we're going to hire one more person that's going to achieve so much more mowing of the lawns, or it's going to get us to 80% of the goal. So I'd like to see this actually tied in, and while it may not be a direct budget performance, it is the performance of the city. And so I'd like to see that added as a narrative process in the future for budget discussions.
Right, and I understand that. Because of the economy, the past probably 6 or 7 years, we've basically been in survival mode, and that's kind of the stance we've been taking. But now, we're starting to come out of it, and I think those are great points, and I think you're correct.
Okay, so the last 2 items in terms of projects, the fraud, waste, and abuse program coordination. So a couple comments there. One is, so we have received, I forgot to write down the number, a handful of reports through that hotline. All of them have been reports that were something that didn't rise to the occasion of fraud, waste, and abuse, were something that we could forward to the city manager, for example, the sheriff. We just had one that we forwarded to the district attorney. It was actually a report from an organization outside of the city, not about the city, but something that they had encountered, and so forwarded it to the district attorney so that they would have that, should that type of report come about in the future from other sources, they have the benefit of the information. So it's been, working from that standpoint. I know Vice Chairperson Pro's interest in the fraud, waste, and abuse program were to make sure that we worked into this fiscal year before it was over some web-based training for the employee base. So we did training initially at the board level and the department director level, manager level. In that work with the city to get a little bit more exposure, build a little bit more awareness for the hotline. But I guess I'd have to say it has been working, and in fact, even getting, like I said, reports from folks outside of the city. So that's kind of nice. And then the last one is the employee efficiency study. So we did report back on that in December. What I just wanted to mention here is the city manager reported to the Board of Supervisors in February his implementation plan relative to each of the findings and the recommendations in the plan and the report. And I thought that was a really good discussion. That was sort of, and I mentioned to the board at that time, that was how I think we've all envisioned this process working, where there's direction from the audit committee that's approved by the board in terms of audit program activities. A report comes back to the audit committee. If accepted, recommended to the board. If the board accepts it, direction to management to develop a response, an implementation plan. And so that's what the city manager reported back on. So I thought that was we saw the full loop, at least in terms of that. And then that information's been added to the audit tracking report, which is the next agenda item. All of our work is within budget, and I guess I would say it's all proceeding towards being completed, within the fiscal year.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any comments or questions of committee members? Any public comment?
Michael?
Oh, you've got some.
Question on, you didn't address the employee efficiency study. You've expended the entire budget. Is that study done then?
Yes, that was presented in December. Yes, no problem.
Okay, next agenda item, item 10, discussion and possible action regarding monitoring of the audit findings response tracking report, and possible direction to the internal auditor, and discuss the monitoring with the Board of Supervisors. So could you, I guess at this time, go over the, I think we all have a report on the various projects and the tracking, so if you can kind of get us up to date on that.
Yeah, so that one looks like this. It's a 16-page report. So really the cover page summarizes it. Three things to point out here, at least since the last report of this nature. So the first is under the community facility cost recovery study for Eagle Valley Golf Course. So we've had sort of our first entry into the actual savings column, and that's based on the revenue that the city is receiving from Eagle Valley based on the contract that they negotiated for 6% of their revenue. You could argue whether this is something that, certainly this isn't trying to take credit for it, but we're trying to align expenditures and savings, or in this case revenue associated with it. If we reflect back to 2012, I think the revenue from the Eagle Valley was zero. 14 was 70-something thousand, and I think, Nick, you anticipate that generally, if things go reasonably, it should be in the sort of the 100K level.
Right, that's correct, yeah. They've been doing about $1.7 million, $1.8 million, so 6%
right.
of that's about 100,000.
And so that's great. I mean, the contract that was negotiated with Eagle Valley really, in a way, was in one fell swoop kind of a strategy that addressed a lot of the things in a way that were in our report, but the outcome is what's great, and was a win for everyone. And so I think it's worth noting that the activity, the attention to that particular issue has reaped some benefit.
Can I ask a question on that,
Sure.
just so that we can clarify something? Prior to the negotiated contract, there were those types of dollars that were due to the city as the bond payment that then was forgiven and moved. And so this 101,000 is just because, again, the economy is starting to get better and they're paying 6% of the contract. But so that money would have been due anyway. It's not really new money, it's just their ability to pay the money. Am I closer to accurate there? I just want to make sure that no one
Yeah, no,
misunderstands the revenue.
no, I think that's fair. Again, for the record, Nick Providenti. What we were doing before we renegotiated that contract is they had a fixed dollar amount that they obviously weren't able to pay. And so with this new contract, we negotiated a percentage of the total revenue. So, if they don't do well, then they just pay less, basically. So, we anticipated about 100,000. And again, this contract is going to go on basically forever as long as they're there. So, once those bonds get paid off, they'll continue to pay us 6% of that revenue. And we'll be able to, I think the plan is to put that money aside for deferred maintenance at the golf course. That's the plan to do that. So, those bonds will be paid off in, 10 years or so. And once that gets done, again, we'll still be getting that money from the Carson City Municipal Golf Corporation. So.
Right, and I think that's part of the beauty of the strategy the city utilized there. I mean, yes, that's money that the city should have been receiving due to the bond payments, but wasn't. In the strategy that the city took to, in essence, guarantee to get payment, at least at a certain percentage, was great. And so the city is getting money now that it wasn't getting before, that was supposed to. So technically not new money, but a dollar versus nothing is.
Well, and the gain really won't happen until the bonds are paid off. That's the issue that I'm trying to get to is the city will not benefit overall. So about 10 years, the bonds will be paid off. And then that money can.
I believe so.
Give or take.
Yeah, give or take.
We want to hold you 9.5, 10.5, somewhere in there. Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to look at, and I think when we started looking at performance measures, is saying, what the potential savings. The reason why we focused on performance measurements at first, I think, was really there was some direction from the mayor that he wanted to see that because there'd been a lot of investment in that, as well as if we had gone into internal controls or something like that, which we're now starting to do, we wanted to get some stuff where we could find out maybe very quickly if there were some inefficiencies and get the performance. So I do think it's important to note what those were. And I remember when we were going through that, and I think it was listening to some of the testimony and what was going on here, I think it really helped highlight doing an audit on this, that something had to be done. And it kind of like just stopped the hemorrhaging. So I think there was a real value in that, and it's good to see the actual savings. And I guess had nothing been done, because nothing had been done for a while, we could have assumed that because there's a lot of other priorities that to be taken care of, and it was kind of a small dollar thing compared to everything else. So it got kind of like left to the side. But it's good to see that as a result of some of these audits, we are starting to see some benefits. And not only that, but again, if things hadn't changed, this is because of that. We're looking at some future benefit in the next few years.
Right, and actually, I was just thinking about, Mr. Chair, as you were talking. So, the $50,000 in this particular situation for potential savings was the dollar value that we estimated in terms of revenue increases and cost reductions that Eagle Valley could realize by doing a whole host of things as far as our recommendations. And that was, in essence, to help them operate more efficiently, but in reality, it was to try to free up money so that they could make their payments, right? And so in what the city did there is really they sort of trumped that and said, well, here's a mechanism that you're going to make your payments. Hopefully, Eagle Valley is taking advantage, at least some of the recommendations, or in finding implementing those to operate more efficiently. But in reality, we got a surrogate for that, which was better. It's a better surrogate, so.
Yeah, well, they're independent nonprofit, so it was a matter of just we can make some recommendations, but really it's a matter of they're responsible for the bottom line. I think our concern is the city getting their payments to help reduce those bombings, and that wasn't happening. So however it happens, it's happening now. So I just wanted to say again that I think this whole audit process is very beneficial, and it's neat to see some of that coming out of it, so that I think when we talk to we go before the board, it's good to see that some of these projects, just because the decision's made, there is no real savings, but it's good to see that some of these things do actually come out with a real dollar savings.
So just two other comments. One is the fleet management efficiency study and fleet utilization. We still want to get the information that was presented to the audit committee, I think in December, or the prior meeting. Again, my timing's terrible, but the city's fleet manager made a very nice presentation to the audit committee on all the actions that they are taking in response to the two studies. And so, for example, two of the biggest or most important recommendations were hiring a fleet manager, which the city did, purchasing fleet management software, which I believe at the time they were in the process of vetting. I think they had identified the software. I can't remember if they had purchased it or not. But those were some of the things on sort of the critical path to the city being able to operate the overall fleet operations more efficiently and more effectively. And so I wanted to get their responses, in essence, their activities into this report, and we'll do so. And then finally, the third one was that we had added the employee efficiency study, the 27 findings there. All of the management's responses are in the pages that follow. I think they're pages 11 through 16, and then so that's been added. Those were the three comments I had about the tracking report.
On the fleet study, I remember when we were discussing that, and what just got my attention was when we're looking at the performance and the burden rate. It just showed that there was some real inefficiencies there. I was wondering, there were several recommendations. I don't know if Moss Adams or if staff needs to answer this, but were some of those vehicles, I know one of the recommendations was several of the vehicles be retired to help with the cost savings. Do you know if that's been implemented at all? Or if they're
I do not know. I know I'd have to ask Darren Schultz, the Public Works Director, but we can find out. I just don't know.
The reason why I asked too is I know there was several. That was one of the recommendations to make this work. There's the buying the software, there's the manager, and I was hoping that probably by now, like in June, because it would have been about a year, we would start to see some results. But it seems like things have been kind of slow at getting started and happening. At this point, Mark, when do you think that we can start to look and see we can get some numbers to see if there's really a noticeable improvement?
Well, critical to many of the recommendations was the software, which would give the fleet management team the ability to track and report on some of the data that was really behind some of those findings or recommendations in terms of the burden rate and things like that. And so, I would say a good 6 to 12 months after the software was in place, so that the data can be gathered and sort of validated and amassed to have something, enough to be able to report back. But what I don't know is when the start date may be on the software, or if in fact it's already in place. I don't have. Do you know, Nick?
Yeah, I'm not positive. I know that they do have some new systems out there that. They hired a new fleet manager, and they're building a new building out there. But yeah, if you wanted more specifics on that fleet, we would probably need to agendize that item and have Darren come out and actually give a report on that.
And the other thing we can do, if we can get the fleet manager to fill out the management responses to them. I mean, he gave a nice report. It was just all verbal. That, I think, Mr. Chair, would give you probably some of the answers.
Yeah, I think I would like to see some progress. I don't want a year to go by and then find out. So I think if we need to agendize this maybe in the future and get some more information or get some reports, I think that's important. I just want to say we're on track. If they are following all the implementation, or they're implementing all the recommendations, and that way too, I guess I kind of like to see how close our targets come in and hold Moss Adams accountable, a little bit for, they figure if we're going to be doing this, we're going to be getting these kind of savings and this kind of thing. So I would like to see how close you get to that.
So for me, can I ask some process questions on this, being new to this committee? The response findings column is blank, and I assumed from the legend that those would be the ones. So just for example, facility cost recovery, there were 15 findings. Should there not be response findings, which means that management accepted those 15 and are going to attempt to implement, or they liked 13 of them? I'm failing to understand how we're bringing this whole report even to closure, so that I can track an item and say 13 are done, 10 are pending, 2 we're not even going to do, whether good idea, but we can't implement it. I'm not able to track, so.
Yeah, it's a very insightful question. So
like-
I'll give you the best answer I can. I mean, there is an answer. So for the first 2 projects, the 2 community facility projects, I believe that the Parks and Recreation Director would say that there are a number of recommendations in those reports that would require board direction. So yes, you can do this. No, you can't do that. Yes, you can pursue this, like a change in fee, for example. And so what I know is that there hasn't been a quote-unquote implementation plan put together relative to those recommendations. So there really isn't a basis at this point for saying that the intention for responding to the recommendations is X, 13 out of 15, 2 out of 15. So that foundational work isn't there. Really, the only one where that exists, and I should have filled it out, would be for the employee efficiency study. Although it's my interpretation of the city manager's response to each of the recommendations. And so, for example, I concluded that 13 were completed, but there's another between 13 and 27, so the difference of 14, for example, some of those would fall into the bucket of the city doesn't intend to do anything, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like I've always said, they're not going to agree with everything that we say and recommend. And some of those can't be completed yet, or will take time, or will take some other activity to happen first for it to be completed. And so I could have estimated the response findings based on the city manager's report, even though it's not a formal implementation plan. But you're sort of hitting on the gap that has existed in the process of goes to the audit committee, that has worked, goes from the audit committee to the board, that has worked. The clear board direction to management to say, okay, what are you going to do? That we haven't fired on all cylinders on. And I would say the best example of that working was the employee efficiency study, where there was clear direction from the board, and even the discussion of how much time to give management to respond right with their plan. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but.
Well, I'm looking, again, it's the value of the report for both the, I guess I can kind of speak for myself in both roles here as the audit and the Board of Supervisors. It doesn't do us any good to pay to have something audited, review, and recommendations if we're not going to follow through to the final step, which is, and so one of the things at the last meeting when the efficiency study was presented at the board level, I actually asked for a status of whether or not those items are closed so that it could then be translated over to this tracking device so that we as the audit committee can know what's left to be tracking and showing the successes. And so if there's something, are you saying that maybe from the Board of Supervisors level you need a little more push to have the departments report open statuses, and have us say we're going to close that item from the board level to the staff level? I mean, where's the gap that we can fix?
Yeah, so how this works in other cities, so it's close. We don't need the board to do that, but what we need the board to do is clearly direct management to develop a response, a plan to respond. And then with that articulated, we can then determine if things have been closed. So in other locations, we validate the response. And so, for example, when it's having to do with internal controls, so that we're saying, okay, two things. Did the city take the action that to do what they said they would do, and did what they do actually address the issue? So they might have done something, but it's possible it didn't really resolve the issue. If it's segregation of duty, they had someone else do it, but there's just still not the clear segregation that you're looking for because the same person still has some involvement with, two pieces of the activity. So the part that has been missing has been having a clear response. So again, I'll go to the fleet. So fleet has clearly taking steps to address some of the recommendations, but some of those were prerequisites. They needed to have a fleet manager. They need to have the software to do certain things. So we've identified in here, well, yeah, we know they've done some of the things, but there is no plan that we're sort of, exactly.
And I think as staff, I'm not sure that we've gotten the direction, on what to do. We typically, we're not exactly sure on some of these things what, the audit committee or the board actually has in mind for this. If they're wanting to have a report at every meeting on, all these findings or those types of things. So I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but we're still kind of in a work in progress. We're still trying to determine what we actually want and, what the board wants, with this finding list. So.
I remember we've had this conversation before about this gap with the board, and this is probably, I think, Supervisor Bagwell, being new, is looking at this freshly for us all to say we got to get this taken care of. I think probably on this report, maybe what we need to do is, as far as columns, I think the process, and typically in an audit, I found that the process is auditor comes up with some recommendations, goes to staff, they accept or they reject. We have a column for those. Then we have a next column when we go before the board, and we have what the board actually details, saying this is what we want to have done, and then that's what we're really tracking. It might be that the staff accepts 15 comments, and the board says, no, we only care about these 2, and that's fine. So all we do is look at the 2, and then we start to follow through in another column, like when that's completed and done. So maybe, if possible, Moss Adams can just fix this report and get as far as just add that titling, and then that would be the process, so that, again, it goes to the staff, we then go to the board, and then we ask for clear direction from the board on the items specifically. And I think in the last meeting I had with them, I think that was starting to happen. Supervisor Bonkowski actually was trying to implement it, and it was hard for them at first to get used, but if nothing else, I'll do my part, and possibly Mark can help us to really make it clear these are the specific items and what's the decision on that, on each of those items, and only then will it then get on the report for something that's then to be tracked for continued follow-up.
Well, and then the process that the Board of Supervisors will, I would assume, would direct then staff. Is it quarterly update your outstanding audit items until it closes and verifies?
Right, that's how it works.
So that we can drop them off this list, because I'm looking at this going, okay, there's 88 items on here.
Correct.
And I would, anyway, so that we can get the process actually working, and the public is, again, getting their money's worth. That's what's imperative to me, is that we're not spending their money and getting no production for that, so.
Agreed.
And I thought, and I assumed, and correct me if I was wrong, I thought that, like, when this report was being put together, do you check with staff as far as the status beforehand? So it's not just, where they're at on everything before you give it to us?
Well, yeah, so sort of the two parts are the part that city staff would complete, even though we do some of the populating, would be the management response, and then what the status of action on it. So for example, does the city staff, city management feel like they have completed? And if they've completed, then, we can, do some, either we inherently know, or we can do some observation testing, or just know that something has been put in place to sort of validate that, yes, we're aware that the city has, in fact, completed that. So there's populating the initial information, findings, recommendations. There's the city response, city information on status, and then we can validate.
Yeah, that status was the part that, so when we're looking at this, and I believe we had that in a meeting, that basically when you're populating this, you're basically checking with staff to see where they're at on things. So is that the case with this particular report?
Yeah, although I don't think this one has the latest information, probably.
Right. And I think what we probably need to do is, I think on the efficiency study, I thought, we basically had most of the items, completed, based on what the city manager was saying at the last meeting. Some of these other items, they're fairly old, and I'm not sure what we want to do. Basically the golf course, I think, is basically done. I don't know that we're going to really do much else with that.
I think that's my point. Should we
Right.
not then close that?
Right. So I think we should probably, the community facility cost recovery, we might want to discuss that.
Actually address that.
Yeah, discuss that a little bit further with Roger, but I know a lot of it, like you said, Mark, there has to be some board discussion on, if they want to take some of these actions. But I think the golf course is done. I think probably the efficiency study, for the most part, is probably done. Based on what the city manager had brought, to the board meeting. As far as the fleet, I still, that's kind of a work in progress, I think, as well. But I think we probably just need to kind of figure out what exactly we want to, again, 88, columns is kind of a lot on this, and maybe we just.
Well, I guess the thinking was the golf was there until we were able to demonstrate some of the dollars, which is this the first time we had, and so that should come to the audit committee to see. The efficiency study, everything should come on here at least once, right, so that it's being presented to the audit committee. I think I would say for the employee efficiency study, for example, that a number of those findings could come off now as completed, but I'm sure that there are still some there that are, I would consider open, that it's not something that the city could do yet. It's predicated on some other activity happening, or and certainly in some cases predicated on funding, right? So we could decide to keep those on or not.
That's the big issue is whether, the funding,
Okay. That's my thought there. So.
I'm going to say, so looking at the one on the facility cost recovery, so certainly there's an opportunity, and I can talk to Roger too, or the city manager can, there's an opportunity to take those items to the Park and Rec Board with the actual fees and things like that, and determine whether or not there's any recommendations from the Parks and Rec Committee to the Board of Supervisors to implement any of those, and that at least a formal action is taken to move forward, or to say, no, the fees are fine, or something of that nature, so we can move these items either closed or implemented, so that they're just not sitting here for a year saying we can't look at it because of money. It still should be addressed on whether or not the item should be reviewed. And so potentially we can move this particular audit in that fashion.
Yeah, and that just sort of triggered my memory there. And the question is, when something is closed, I guess what I would like to see, that when the internal auditors basically come back and say, hey, these are closed items, we think, have a separate list for that. So I would like to take that to the board, so that we're asking the board, we see these as being closed, and if they have if they feel like it shouldn't be, or that they know it, because I don't want things just to drop off. We want to feel like they've spent this money, they've done this, so when it comes to the close, it comes to the audit committee and we agree with that, then we take it to the board. So probably have every time we do these reports, a recommended closed list. And we'll just have that as well.
And I'll say that since I happen to sit on the Parks and Rec Board, I'll be happy to bring that up as an agenda item for that committee.
Okay, was there anything else to add to that report? Okay, was there any comments or questions of audit committee members? Any public comment? Okay, at this time, we will go on to agenda item 11, schedule the next meeting for the Carson City Audit Committee. I guess my question to you is Mark, when you might be ready. I think one of the things that we're looking to have completed and to report on will be the internal control findings. When do you think that Moss Adams will be ready with that?
I'm confident we'll be ready mid-April to be able to present you with the final report. Some dates that would happen to work for us would be the 15th, 16th, or 21st.
Yeah, on the 15th, even though I'm doing taxes, I'm usually winding it down that day. It's a special day. I know I'll be in town. I'm fine with the 15th. How's everybody else's calendar look?
So are there other items, timing-wise, that is better to wait a month and get more items done? Would we have an opportunity to close any of these other audit items that we just did if we waited long enough for staff, or that wouldn't get accomplished? And get the strategic planning. I'm just trying to utilize our time effectively, and for you too. Is it better to wait? Because weren't you going to do strategic planning with the public in April?
Correct, and bring that back to the board targeted April. So certainly you could wait till after that.
I'm just trying to make sure that there's enough meat in the agenda to again, when we're paying, I think we're paying for your time to come.
Every other hour.
Every other hour. I like that. Okay. So it's just a question as to whether it'd be more appropriate. So you come every other month?
Typically, we work at it every other month, maybe sometimes a third month. And the reason why I'm kind of bringing up this is because I think there's going to be, on the internal control, that's going to be a full meeting. I think that's going to be very important. Also, the timing of that's going to be important because I know Moss Adams' contract is going to come up, and we're going to have to discuss that in May. And I would like to, I personally would like to see what comes out of the internal control review, and because that way they can probably better present to us where they think they may want to go for next year's budget. So I've rarely done 2 months in a row like this, and times have gone on, but I'm kind of thinking under the circumstances it might be important. Do you have any comments on that, Mark?
Yeah, we were kind of thinking that, and it's not about our contract, but there'll be two things. So there's the internal controls report, which I think will be a good discussion. I mean, it's a meaty piece of work, but then it's the next year's audit program, regardless of whether it's Moss Adams or not. But I mean, yes, we have to deal with our contract too, because it's done on a year-to-year. But what we were thinking was, if we brought the internal controls report to you in April, as part of that would be, here are the things that we think would be sort of the logical follow-on areas of focus as a result of that. So where to delve deeper in terms of internal controls. And that was always the intention, that this body of work would provide guidance for future work. So if we brought that to you in April, for example, and gave you our ideas of the next layer of work on internal controls, that would give you time to digest the report, think about those areas, and then we could reconvene late May, early June, and then have the focus on the discussion of the next fiscal year's program. Instead of my only concern is if we do that all at once, that doesn't really give you the benefit of the time to sort of let that gestate and think about different options, and bring your own ideas to the table in terms of the program. So I just, thought kind of in a two-part that would be better for you.
Yeah, when I was referring to the contract, I was really thinking of the plan and everything.
Correct.
Just what are we looking at and what we'll be presenting to the board as far as what you'd be doing for the
Right.
next year and
Right.
and the kind of dollars we would need for
Yep.
those things. I think we just started this year with the internal controls, and I think we want to start to really move forward on that
Yep.
and do more. But, okay, well, is April 15th fine with you as well, Mary? And was that fine for you?
Yeah, the 15th, well, what time are we going to look to then do it?
You tell me.
Do we have room availability issues?
There, I would have to check, but
That can be the tentative date. I mean,
you want to give me a couple dates in case one of them doesn't work out?
You said the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, and the 21st?
The
Not the
16th's a no.
okay,
That's
21st.
Board of Supervisors. I know where the meeting room is used that day.
21st would be another option, if that worked for you.
21st would be fine with me. Okay, with you too? Okay. So maybe Nick would just look at the 15th and the 21st, get back to us, and then we'll see what we'll do.
We'll do it.
And then do we want to look to later times? We had a.
You mean
public
later in the
comment.
day?
Mhm,
Yeah.
so that the public could attend? Do you think one of these meetings, so I heard meaty.
Meaty.
But is it something that, again, you think the public might be very interested in and want to attend? And
Well, typically we meet at 3
3?
or 3:30.
We have typically met
Yeah.
at 3, haven't we?
Later.
We just met early because of the room availability
Oh,
today.
okay.
I mean, we
Okay.
had,
You know, I would like to have our vice chairman here when we have that discussion, just because, you know, we've been doing it for this time, and to make any changes like that, I think he needs to be involved with that. So,
Well, you want to tentatively say 3? I mean.
Tentatively say 3, and then
We
we'll.
can accommodate whatever time,
Yeah.
so that's not an
Yeah,
issue.
Okay. So maybe you can get back to us on that as far as the times and which dates would be available. And when Bill gets back, we can check with him to make sure it's
poll
okay
him.
too.
try and get everybody.
Okay, then public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on any matter that is not specifically included in the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item of the agenda. Any public comment at this time? Seeing some, would you like to step up to the podium? Supervisor Shirk?
For the record, Jim Shirk, citizen and Board of Supervisors, Ward 4. I'm not here speaking for the board, but I'm here, as I was this morning, to elaborate maybe even further on the meeting times that's scheduled for 3 o'clock. It's not justifiable to allow citizens to attend these meetings. Whether they attend or not is their decision, but we have to give them an opportunity to attend. And a working-class citizen cannot attend a meeting 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I urge this board and other boards and committees to start meetings at 5:30, which allows citizens to attend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Supervisor Shirk, and we are considering that. And again, it's Nick is going to get back to us on the times, and we want to make sure with our vice chairman that that's going to work out for him as well. Okay, seeing no other public comment, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned.